It was supposed to be a fun, carefree weekend getaway for a group of college friends. No parents, no responsibilities, just 6 young adults enjoying nature and each other's company. They packed up their gear, loaded up the car, and headed out to the remote campsite deep in the woods. As they set up their tents and gathered firewood, the friends joked and laughed, relishing in the freedom of being away from it all. But little did they know, their idyllic weekend was about to take a dark and terrifying turn. It was Jess who first stumbled upon the mysterious object while gathering kindling. At first glance, it appeared to be an old, ornate box, its surface covered in intricate carvings. Curious, she called the others over to take a look. "Where do you think it came from?" asked Sarah, running her fingers over the strange symbols etched into the wood. "Who cares?" laughed Mike, snatching the box from her hands. "Finders keepers, right?" The others laughed and nodded in agreement, already forgetting about the strange find as they turned their attention back to setting up camp. But as the sun began to set and the shadows grew longer, a sense of unease settled over the group. Little did they know, the box they had so carelessly opened had unleashed an ancient evil, one that was about to make their weekend getaway a living nightmare. As the group sat around the crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories, a sudden rustling in the nearby bushes made them all jump. "What was that?" whispered Jess, her eyes wide with fear. "Probably just a squirrel or something," said Mike, trying to sound nonchalant, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his own unease. They all fell silent, straining their ears for any other sounds. The forest seemed to have gone eerily quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the snap of a twig underfoot. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night, making them all jump to their feet in terror. It was Sarah, her face twisted in a mask of pure horror as she stared at something in the darkness. Before anyone could react, a dark shape lunged out of the shadows, knocking Sarah to the ground. The others watched in stunned silence as the creature tore into her flesh, its sharp claws ripping through her skin like paper. Jess let out a strangled cry, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. Mike and the others stood frozen, unable to move or speak as they watched their friend being torn apart before their very eyes. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished back into the night, leaving Sarah's lifeless body behind. The friends stood in stunned silence, their hearts pounding in their chests as they realized the true horror of what had just happened. As the sun rose the next morning, the remaining friends huddled together in their tent, their eyes red-rimmed from crying and lack of sleep. They had spent the night in terror, jumping at every sound and shadow, afraid that the creature would return to finish them off. "We have to get out of here," whispered Jess, her voice trembling. "We have to go back to town and get help." The others nodded in agreement, but as they began to pack up their gear, a sudden realization hit them: their car was gone. In the chaos of the previous night, they hadn't even noticed that it had been stolen. "Oh my God," breathed Mike, his face pale as a ghost. "We're trapped." The friends spent the day in a state of panic, their nerves frayed and their minds racing with fear. They dared not venture out of the tent, afraid that the creature would return to finish them off. As night fell once again, they huddled together, their hearts pounding in their chests. And then, they heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from outside the tent. Jess let out a whimper, her hands shaking as she clutched the knife she had found in her backpack. The others followed suit, arming themselves with whatever they could find: sticks, rocks, anything that might serve as a weapon. The creature let out another growl, its hot breath visible in the cold night air. The friends held their breath, their knuckles white as they gripped their makeshift weapons. And then, without warning, the creature lunged at the tent, its claws tearing through the fabric like it was paper. The friends screamed in terror, lashing out with their weapons as the creature bore down on them. The creature let out a howl of pain as Jess' knife found its mark, burying itself deep in its shoulder. It reared back, its eyes glowing with rage, and the friends seized their chance. They burst out of the tent, running as fast as they could into the darkness of the woods. Behind them, they could hear the creature's thunderous footsteps as it gave chase, its growls echoing through the trees. Jess led the way, her lungs burning as she pushed herself to run faster. The others followed close behind, their hearts pounding in their chests as they dodged low-hanging branches and leapt over fallen logs. They ran for what felt like an eternity, their legs aching and their lungs on fire. And then, up ahead, they saw it, a glimmer of light through the trees. It was the road, their ticket to safety. With a final burst of energy, they burst out of the woods and onto the deserted road, their chests heaving. They looked around wildly, searching for any sign of the creature, but it had vanished back into the darkness of the forest. Jess let out a shaky laugh, her hands trembling as she pulled out her phone. But to her horror, there was no signal. They were still trapped, with no way to call for help. As they stood there, their hearts pounding in their chests, they knew that they had to keep moving. The creature was still out there, and it was only a matter of time before it found them again. They walked for what felt like hours, their feet aching and their spirits sinking with every step. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and they began to wonder if they would ever find help. And then, up ahead, they saw it, a glimmer of hope in the form of an old, abandoned house. It was a ramshackle affair, its paint peeling and its windows boarded up, but to the friends, it was a sanctuary. They hurried towards the house, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they approached, they could see that the front door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been there recently. Jess hesitated for a moment, her hand on the doorknob. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Mike nodded, his face set in a grim expression. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice low. "It's either this or out there with that thing." Jess took a deep breath and pushed open the door, wincing as it creaked on its hinges. They stepped inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. The house was in a state of disrepair, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and dust coating every surface. But to the friends, it was a haven, a place where they could catch their breath and regroup. As they explored the house, they discovered a locked door in the basement. Jess tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What do you think is in there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike shrugged, his eyes scanning the room. "I don't know," he said, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As they searched the house for supplies, the friends stumbled upon an old, dusty chest in the attic. It was locked, but after a few minutes of fiddling with the latch, Jess managed to pry it open. Inside, they found a collection of old photographs and documents, as well as a strange, ornate box that looked eerily familiar. Jess picked it up, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its surface. "This is it," she whispered, her eyes wide with realization. "This is the box we found in the woods." The others gathered around her, their faces etched with confusion and fear. "But how did it end up here?" asked Mike, his voice trembling. Jess shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know," she said, "but I have a feeling it's connected to all of this." As they examined the box more closely, they noticed a small, hidden compartment in the bottom. Jess pried it open, revealing a tattered old journal and a set of keys. "What do you think this means?" asked Sarah, her voice barely above a whisper. Jess shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know," she said, "but I think we're about to find out." As they pored over the journal, the friends began to piece together the dark history of the box and the creature that had been hunting them. The journal belonged to a man named Dr. Ezra Blackwood, a brilliant but twisted scientist who had been obsessed with the occult. According to the journal, Blackwood had discovered an ancient artifact known as the Pandora's Box, which was said to contain the power to unleash unspeakable evil. He had spent years studying the box, trying to unlock its secrets, and had eventually succeeded in opening it. But the power he had unleashed was far greater than he had anticipated. The box had summoned a powerful demon, a creature of pure evil that had begun to terrorize the nearby town. Blackwood had tried to stop it, but his efforts had been in vain. As the friends read on, they learned that Blackwood had eventually managed to trap the demon back inside the box, but at a terrible cost. The demon had taken his life, and Blackwood had been forced to seal the box away, hoping that it would never be opened again. But now, it seemed that the box had been opened once more, and the demon had been unleashed. And it was up to the friends to find a way to stop it before it was too late. As they studied the journal more closely, the friends discovered a ritual that Blackwood had used to trap the demon inside the box. It was a complex and dangerous ritual involving ancient spells and powerful artifacts, but it was their only hope of stopping the creature. They gathered the necessary supplies from around the house, including a set of old candles and a strange, glowing amulet that Blackwood had used in the ritual. As they prepared to perform the ritual, they could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their task pressing down on them. Jess took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she lit the candles. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike nodded, his face set in a grim expression. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice low. "It's either this or letting that thing roam free." The others nodded in agreement, and together, they began to chant the ancient words of the ritual. As they spoke, the air around them seemed to crackle with energy, and the amulet began to glow brighter and brighter. Suddenly, the door to the basement burst open, and the creature came charging up the stairs, its eyes glowing with rage. The friends screamed in terror, but they kept chanting, their voices growing stronger and more confident with each passing moment. As the creature drew closer, the amulet began to glow so brightly that it was almost blinding. The friends could feel the power of the ritual coursing through them, and they knew that they were close to success. With a final, thunderous roar, the creature lunged at them, its claws outstretched. But just as it reached them, a blinding flash of light erupted from the amulet, engulfing the creature in a swirling vortex of energy. The friends watched in stunned silence as the creature was pulled back into the box, its screams of agony echoing through the house. And then, with a final, earth-shattering rumble, the box slammed shut, sealing the demon inside once more. As the dust settled, the friends stood in stunned silence, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had done it. They had stopped the creature and sealed it back inside the box. But at what cost? They looked around the ruined house, their eyes taking in the destruction that the battle had wrought. Furniture was overturned, walls were cracked, and debris littered the floor. And in the corner, they saw the lifeless body of one of their friends, a victim of the creature's rampage. Jess let out a choked sob, her shoulders shaking with grief. Mike pulled her into a tight hug, his own eyes brimming with tears. They had come so close to losing everything, and the weight of that realization was almost too much to bear. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, they knew that they would never be the same. The horrors they had witnessed, the evil they had faced, had changed them forever. They would carry the scars of this experience with them for the rest of their lives. But as they stepped out into the sunlight, they also knew that they had emerged victorious. They had faced down the darkness and won, and that was something to be proud of. They had proven that they were stronger than the evil that had tried to consume them, and that was a victory that no one could take away. As the friends made their way back to town, they knew that they had to find a way to keep the box safe. They couldn't risk it falling into the wrong hands again, not after everything they had been through. They decided to take it to the local museum, where they knew it would be kept under lock and key. The curator was skeptical at first, but when they showed him the journal and explained what had happened, he agreed to take the box and keep it safe. As they watched the curator carefully place the box in a secure display case, Jess felt a sense of relief wash over her. It was finally over, and they could move on with their lives. But as she turned to leave, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. What if the box was opened again someday? What if another unsuspecting person unleashed the evil that lurked within? The thought sent a chill down her spine, and she knew that she would never be able to rest easy until she knew for sure that the box was safe. As the friends parted ways and went their separate paths, Jess knew that she would never forget the horrors they had faced. The creature, the box, the ritual, it would all be etched into her memory forever. But she also knew that she was stronger for it, that she had faced down the darkness and emerged victorious. And as she looked up at the stars, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the world was a little bit safer now that the box was locked away. Maybe, just maybe, they had made a difference. Only time would tell, but for now, Jess was content to let the past stay in the past. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she was determined to make the most of it. After all, she had already faced down the worst that the world had to offer. What could possibly be worse than that?